Hi, I'm Keith McCullough, and welcome to a special that we wanted to do on Trump versus Clinton and how the politics of it all could affect the marketplace into and out of the election. One of the biggest things that I think you have to be able to close the loop on is obviously where the economy is going, but also who is going to be at the helm in that economic environment. So again, solving one of them, you know where we stand. We think the economy continues to slow, irrespective of who is the president through the election, but what they do on day 1 through 100 is going to be really important, and that's something that I want to dig into with, of course, our Washington policy team. We acquired this research group, the Potomac Research Group, indeed, in the most recent year. So I'm really excited to introduce a lot of their mind share to you. They're very bright people who have a lot of edges, and again, those edges are what we want to get to the very point of today. I'm here with our chief political strategist, JT Taylor, to talk politics and how they might matter to the market. JT, what are the most important themes that you're looking at right now?
Yeah, in the final weeks of the election, with Clinton having a very healthy lead at this point, what we're looking at is the impact that a lead going into Election Day could have on the House and Senate. If she runs the table and takes the House and the Senate, then you're looking at a pure Democratic takeover of Washington in 2017 and beyond, and that could roil the markets. Right now, as it stands, the Democrats are poised to take over the Senate. The House is going to be a bit more of an uphill battle, if you will. It all depends on how confident the Clinton team feels they are in the final weeks here and where they spend their resources. Yep. If they go beyond the states, the battleground states, and start going into states like Georgia and Arizona, red states, then the House could be in trouble. But as it stands right now, it looks as if the House is going to stay in Republican hands.
We spent, as you know, a lot of time in Boston with clients. It was back and forth. It's so interesting to see how quickly Wall Street prices in Hillary winning, which we have to roll with right now. But really it was about the gap or the spread. And that's how you continued to define the probability of the House being lost or won is the spread, is it not?
Exactly.
So how do we think about that or calibrate that?
So if you go back to 2008 and McCain's loss to Obama, he lost by about 6 or 7 points, and the House Republicans lost 20 seats. So if it's higher than 6 or 7 points, then you could start to see a sweep where more and more Republican seats, safer Republican seats start to drop.
That's
so I'd say if you're pushing into landslide, or as we're calling it these days, mudslide territory, then the House is at risk. But as it stands, it looks as if the Republicans will keep the House.
So you put a higher probability on the Democrats taking the Senate, a low probability but rising on the House.
Absolutely.
And then you also talked about this Cat 5 scenario for the Republicans.
Cat 5 scenario with the Republicans is if first swing voters completely turn against the Republican Party, coupled with never Trump Republicans not turning out on Election Day, not voting, and take those two and pair those up with pro-Trump forces voting for Trump only on the ballot, then walking away.
So then you lose.
That's a disaster.
That's a disaster. That's where the House is in play.
That's Cat 5. House is in play. And that's where the sweep comes into
So
play.
if we have this, for our main conclusion, we'll just tell people we just think that under Hillary it's more gridlock. There's a lot of policy implications that you may not get as fast as you think you can get because it's gridlock. But what happens in terms of kind of the tactical, McConnell, how the first called 100 days to 6 months under Hillary, what would that look like?
Yeah, it's going to be it'll be interesting. I don't know that she'll have much of a honeymoon first, but I think she's going to have a very, very fine needle to thread. Begin with Mitch McConnell. If he loses the Senate, we'll look at everything through the lens of 2018 and whether or not he can take the Senate back. The Democrats have 25 seats to defend in 2018, and the Republicans only have 8.
Wow, so that's the big deal.
So that's the big deal. So he's going to do, go back to what we talked about before. In 2010, Mitch McConnell said his biggest agenda item in the Senate is to make sure that Obama is a one-term president. So I think that you're going to look at a McConnell probably trying to impede a Clinton agenda. She's also going to be confronted with her left. and the Elizabeth Warrens of this world. If you look at what Elizabeth Warren did over the past couple of days, she called for the resignation or the firing of the SEC chair, Mary Jo White. So right there, she's also exercising already, and Clinton hasn't won. She's exercising her influence in that realm and what she wants to do in the Senate. So look for a very emboldened Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Sherrod Brown. We talked about Sherrod Brown becoming chairman of the banking committee, and that's another threat to the markets as well.
That's a big one because a lot of our subscribers really tune into the bearish case on financials, lower case for interest rates. Growth is slower. Hillary wins, growth is slower. We're at 0.4% GDP for the fourth quarter. You have a new president, but you also have an intense regulatory body on the financials. You know, can you explain a little bit, Sherrod Brown, for example? People may or may not be aware of who.
Sherrod Brown is a sitting senator from Ohio. He is the ranking minority member on the Senate Banking Committee. If the Senate turns Democrat, he will become the chairman of the Banking Committee.
Oh, lovely.
And so he is a liberal firebrand and will probably team up with Elizabeth Warren and Sanders as early and often as possible.
I mean, and they've been powerful so far, and that's without that position. Without being head of the Senate Banking Committee, they've had Stump resign at Wells Fargo. They put people under fire and on the coals immediately. How about, isn't there a chance as well that Bernie is the head of the Budget Committee?
Head of the Budget Committee. He's next in line to head up the Budget Committee, and depends on if Schumer will become Majority Leader. And it all depends on how he wants that committee to look like. But at this point, Bernie Sanders is poised to become chair. Now that could change. Bernie may want another chairmanship, but right now he's next in line.
So when it comes to investing in financial services and understanding the regulatory environment, if Hillary wins, we go more left, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, I know what to do with that one. How about infrastructure spending? That's something that everybody from Boston to San Francisco to London seems to be long. Is the timing going to play out?
The timing could play out. I mean, it's going to require, everyone thinks that, you're just going to snap your fingers and a transportation bill is going to appear. You're going to need pay-fors. And we talked a little bit about the fact that Paul Ryan's majority in the House is going to shrink. And what's not going to shrink are the Tea Party members in that caucus. So these folks are the anti-spend folks. So they are going to want pay-fors for everything. So how do you pay for a transportation bill? It will only come most likely from a repatriation bill, which, by the way, Paul Ryan and Chuck Schumer have worked on before. So there is a foundation for a bill to bring back $2 trillion at a rate of somewhere between 12 and 14%.
Wow.
But a long, long way. It's in repatriation, and others want corporate tax reform. And again, you're going to have the left saying and clamoring for a personal income tax bill as well.
So the right, interestingly, maybe not surprisingly, so it's a bigger proportional representation for the Tea Party. Where does Paul Ryan go, right or left of right?
I think Paul Ryan tries to split the baby.
Okay.
But I actually think he'll end up going left, slightly left, and that's not much. He has to. Okay. That's the only way he'll be able to govern. And he is, there are rumors that he wants to do something in 2020 as in run for president. And I don't know that you could spend 2 years up there as a do-nothing Congress or do-nothing House. So I do think that there'll be some areas of compromise with Clinton. It's yet to be seen what they will be beyond transportation infrastructure, maybe a few ACA fixes, a minimum wage. A lot of folks are talking about minimum wage right now. We talked about this last week. Minimum wage, I think there is some sentiment that it could pass the Senate. There is bipartisan support for a minimum wage hike in the Senate. I think it's probably dead on arrival in the House.
Well, that would be,
as long as it stays in Republican hands.
Yeah, if you put the House in play, minimum wage very much in play. Bernie's very loud on that. I mean, Trump and Hillary want higher minimum wage. That's something that a lot of institutional investors care on because it's bad for corporate profits into the slowest point of the cycle. So that would be, depending on what your political outlook is, that's one thing. If you have the wrong economic outlook, you wouldn't know, what to marry that up with. So if we're right, if Hedgeye's forecast is right, we're going to be at the slowest point of the economic cycle after the vote, and they're going to have to go down this path of gridlock or some type of compromise in fairly short order. Wow, so that sounds really exciting.
Yeah, very exciting.
So it'll keep us awake, it'll keep us on our toes. Thank you very much for spending some time.
Absolutely, Keith.
Now I'm with our demography sector head, the one and the only Mr. Neil Howe, to go through his top themes. Mr. Howe, I don't think I've called you Mr. Howe. So Mr. Howe, how is the theme work going for you into the election?
I feel a little dignified here because of that. So that's the proper plane that we should be talking this morning. Listen, I'm going to go through quickly, I think, a number of the big points, the big questions. Point number one is, does Trump have a chance? That's what people are asking me. Is it done? Mm-hmm. And I would just say, no, but the stars would have to line up exactly right for Trump to win at this point. He needs a great debate. He needs an October surprise to go in his direction instead of the other way.
It could be the jobs report. It's right before, right on the Friday before the election. That damn jobs report's got to be announced.
I think he's going to need something a little more than that. He's going to need most of the undecideds to go his way. The undecideds are actually a larger share of the electorate this election. And he needs those shy Trump voters. You know, that's always been a thesis. There are a number of people who vote for Trump but just aren't telling pollsters. If he doesn't get all those things lining up, yeah, Hillary's a lock.
Okay.
So number two, the Senate. The Senate is the big story. The Senate is basically a toss-up right now, a virtual tie. Most forecasters are giving the Democrats a slight edge. That's because there are so many of the people up this year for the Senate are you know, it's 8 Democrats versus well, it's 10 Democrats versus 24 Republicans that are up, but still they have a good chance of keeping the Senate, and that is a huge difference. United GOP front with regard to the White House, obviously control over the Supreme Court elections, control of the media, control of all the Senate committees, and so on. That would make a big difference. But let me get to the more interesting one. So imagine on January 20th, 2017, we have Hillary Clinton sworn in. Obviously, one or both houses of Congress remains GOP. That's kind of the scenario we're looking at. So here are the different governing scenarios issuing from that. Conciliation, gridlock, or civil war. That's it.
Lovely.
Conciliation would be if, amazingly, they actually find common ground on some basic agenda items. The second scenario is gridlock, which is basically what we had during Obama 2. The second term of the Obama administration, the Congress basically does nothing legislatively, doesn't agree to go along, but pretty much gives the administration leeway to do whatever he can do, or in this case she can do, through executive order and you know, whatever the Supreme Court says that the executive branch can do. Third scenario, civil war. And that is, and this I think is a lot more likely than people think.
Really?
And that is, well, think about it. You're going to have this enormous, angry, you know, Trumpista group who thinks that the entire election was stolen. And remember, Hillary doesn't really have any ideological depth. I mean, you know, all the people on the left on her side would have preferred Bernie. So, you know, how enthusiastic are they going to be to support her? There could be a sense of weakness here. And here's the deal. It could be that the House will drop articles of impeachment within the first month for stuff that she did as Secretary of State and so on. Here's the thing about impeachment. Impeachment means whatever the House thinks it means. There is no definite. You can impeach a president or any high public official for whatever you want it. You know, there is no criteria. It's not like a legal proceeding. It's not like
so they could do an impeachment as episode number 1 on Trump TV. Trump TV? Or is that what Trump TV is going to be? A perpetual impeachment of the President of the United States?
Well, he will provide the oratory and the fire and brimstone on that.
Yeah.
But the House may do that. You're going to have hearings, lawsuits, subpoenas. You're going to have, in some cases, people wondering. There could be a congressionally appointed person who's going to take over some function. The executive branch could have their own person. People won't know who to take orders from. I mean, this could be serious. And then you have a Supreme Court that'll be gridlocked at 4x4. And if the Senate ends up in the GOP, be prepared for the Senate not to approve any more Supreme Court justices. And as they retire, we might just have a little rump of a Supreme Court gradually. These are scenarios, don't forget, that aren't implausible at this point. Such is the distrust, right? Such is the distrust.
Great point. And that trust, when it finds its way, like we're trying to tie this back to what people do in the marketplace. So many people, Neil, I mean, forget about the politics of it all. Think about how distrustful people
Exactly.
are about markets.
And think too about, I'm going to get to my next point, and that is, how are the markets going to respond to
Exactly.
this? So here's my next kind of question. Are we going to see relief rally, crash, or both? Now here's what I think we're going to see. We're going to see initially a relief rally. Everyone think, okay, wow, it's all over now. Now they can kind of get together, and that was scary.
Yeah.
But it's all over now. But
especially in places where the market is fearful of, like healthcare is now the worst performing sector in the market for the year to date. As you and I know, it's a late cycle component of the economy, so it's slowing and disappointing, but there's a big component of that people fear. They're just imputing that Hillary's going to win, therefore I'm going to sell my biotech stocks. So there could easily be a rally in the things that are rightly confused and concerned ahead of it.
Well, there could be, and I think there's going to be a relief rally because everyone thinks, okay, they'll finally come together. It'll be a bit more conciliation or something.
That's the kumbaya scenario,
right.
Or was that the conciliation scenario?
That's the conciliation. But what's going to happen is that with the slowing economy, remember the timing of all this. So by January, it may be a lot more plausible now, or a lot more credible that the economy really is slowing, maybe going, negative.
Yep.
And at that point, you could have the Civil War scenario kind of beginning to heat up. And remember, we're out of ammo. We're stranded on the zero bound when it comes to monetary policy. So at this point, unlike in 2008, 2009, Congress will not do bailouts into this situation. There will be no fiscal. All of the stuff that got us out of the earlier one will not be on the table, and monetary policy will have nothing left. Okay, this is a completely new scenario, and at that time, markets may really react negatively.
Well, that's interesting because JT said under the scenario where it's a Republican House but a Democrat Senate, however marginal.
Right.
You have Sherrod Brown running the Senate Banking Committee.
Yeah.
You have Bernie potentially running the budget. You have a very negative environment for bailouts. I mean, for example, that's not going to be the first thing they want to sign off on.
Well, and imagine, and in a way, that could actually make the Civil War worse with Democrats in the Senate, because at that point, the House could just think, we're the only bulwark preventing a political revolution in this country. We are going to be the only, so they will do anything to stop and obstruct whatever goes on. So anyway, this is a dangerous scenario, not just in a recession, but also anything geopolitical that happens.
Right.
Putin is now using this period of weakness to try to be more aggressive, with regard to Eastern Europe, the Baltics, the Mediterranean, Middle East, and so forth. We have a situation in East Asia. Everyone is going to know that there's weakness here. They will test. And again, will we be able to respond? I think this is a very vulnerable time, just given the economy, the exhaustion of the central banks, which is the only institution that doesn't really need any democratic cooperation, right? But they can't do anything anymore, right? So this is a dangerous time,
Very
vulnerable
dangerous.
time.
Particularly when you if you don't mind me saying, I mean, for you, you're one of the best, if not the best in the world at contextualizing this moment across a very long-term history, like a socioeconomic history. So if we look at this moment that you've called the fourth turning, you've written a book about it, obviously, but I mean, at this point, isn't this what should be happening? You're saying the chances of civil war are rising, in probability speak, but if you look at the long term, it should be a lot higher than just rising. This is when it should happen.
This may be when we see it. Remember that a good 35-40% of the electorate is going to believe that this was a stolen election, right? Stolen, illegitimate. I mean, rigged. I mean, complete, right? And basically that it is a completely cynical power play here. And this is the times of history when the trust completely breaks down and people just say, we got to do everything we can to prevent history from making a terrible mistake. Two other things I should mention. One is, and this keep in mind, is a little bit of a longer term trend, but I think it could have a real impact, and you're absolutely right. The Democrats taking over the Senate makes this a bigger deal, and that is populism. All right, And I'm saying that because remember, both parties have shown a powerful populist surge. This is bipartisan. The Bernie Sanders wing of the Democrats, which really practically took the nomination away from Hillary Clinton, and Trump completely reshaping the Republican Party. Both parties, and this isn't just in this country. This is across much of Europe. We're seeing many other countries now. This populist impulse is going to have a huge impact on certain industries. Obviously, financials. I mean, just look at this thing with Wells Fargo recently, this kind of show trial that they had. But you're going to see financials hammered for what they do and who they are, and for what everyone thinks they got away with back in the last recession. Luxury brands, I think, are going to be under fire. Firms with dominant market share. I mean, the Exxons and even the Apples now. Look at how they're getting hauled out and going to be hugely penalized by the EU, you know, for what they've been doing in Ireland and so on. This could be big, and I think firms in sectors with a lot of low-wage and informal labor. We already see that through the overtime rules, through minimum wage laws. We're going to see more of that. And again, if the Democrats take over the Senate, that could marginalize the Republicans more, but it could hugely open this wave of populism that we're seeing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
And finally, realignment. Realignment. We have different kinds of realigning elections. They occur about every 40 years or so in American history, but we get huge realignments about every 80 years, the big realignments. And I'm talking about the New Deal in the 1930s. I'm talking about the 1850s, with the disappearance of the Whig Party and its reformation as the Republican Party, right on the eve of the Civil War. So the Whig Party, which disappeared, reshaped itself as a Republican Party, and was incredibly successful. They went on basically to rule America for the next 70 years.
Yep.
Well, now it's the Republican Party. Will they go the way of the Whig Party this election? Will they just crack up? Or will they be completely redefined by this new populist surge? How will the Democrats be redefined? I think that we have never seen the definition of the parties enter such a time of fluidity, right? I mean, who is the I don't even think the Democrats are really Hillary anymore. Hillary herself is sort of a backward-looking leader, right? You see these new currents are very different. I think this is a period of fundamental political realignment in this country.
I just love that there's going to be so many different places to start thinking about new opportunities, both long and short. This is, Neil, this is awesome. You know, you're the man.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Keith.
Now I'm with our defense policy expert, General Emo Gardner, to go through what he thinks is going on in this kind of topsy-turvy world, Emo. I mean, at the end of the day, what do you think?
Well, it is a pretty dynamic time, and the state of where we are with defense policy, it's a dynamic situation regardless of who wins the election. I think there's three main themes overall in the defense policy world. The first is our current strategy is going to change. No one is satisfied with President Obama's overall foreign policy. Many in the Republican Party and particularly Trump are talking about it being not aggressive enough. Hillary is seen as much more hawkish. Her advisors are much better known throughout D.C. and they're all many policies, I think particularly towards Russia, will be more aggressive, more strident. So regardless of what happens, I think the strategy is going to change. The takeaway for that, for investors, is we have the Budget Control Act, which sets a cap on defense spending. President Obama has consistently proposed budgets about $30 billion higher than the cap. No one likes his strategy. Their strategies are all more aggressive. There's no way that it's just an indication of the upward budget pressure. The second main theme, which kind of drives that, supports that and points towards a higher defense budget top line, is the demand for recapitalization. We essentially went into a procurement holiday in the 90s. We did not replace the equipment that we bought in the 80s, all that equipment. We bought 230 Air Force jets per year in the 80s. We're buying 3 submarines per year in the 80s. And although we spent a lot of money here in the early part of this century on wars, and it feels like a lot of defense spending, it didn't go to airplanes and ships. And so now those ships and airplanes are all 30 plus years old. The programs are in place, primarily F-35s and the shipbuilding program, but we now have to spend the money to go out and get up to full rate production on those. So recapitalization must be served, and that depends on budgets that are planned to go forward and increase in the future, and that must go forward.
Do you think that that'll change if you have Hillary and a Dem Senate versus a Republican Senate? Do you think that the size and the scope of the recap will change?
I think what happens is, I think there's consensus within the parties and about the demand for recapitalization. Everybody gets it that you're retiring over 200 jets a year. You can't do that year after year and not have an Air Force. And we can see the threats in the world to do that. I think the difference is the Dems will probably use it as a hostage to increase non-defense spending.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I would expect Hillary to come in and propose a very large stimulative budget, which includes increased non-defense spending and also defense spending to accommodate this, and that would be sort of the carrot and stick that they'd be used on there. I would think, well, it's difficult to know what a Trump administration would do because it's much more obscure about who his advisors would be and who would come in there, but he certainly at every instance talks about making the military great again, and so certainly the defense spending, but most likely he would not want to increase non-defense, and we'd run into a problem with the Dem Senate. So.
But this would be a place, I mean, if you're looking for a massive infrastructure spending plan, a huge bucket that you could drop a lot of money in, Democrats fully loaded.
Right, absolutely. The programs are in place. This is shovel ready. The defense programs are there. I mean, we're on the upward slope for example, on Joint Strike Fighter production. We're buying about 53 jets this year, or delivering 53 jets this year, and they're on path to deliver 100 3 years from now. So it's just a question, there's a number of programs. All the programs are in place. Shipbuilding, we have to begin building submarines. Those development programs are well underway. So it's all about putting the money against it. The Navy budget assumes a 30% increase over the next 5 years. So the question is how is that going to come? Is that going to come? Is the price for that a concomitant increase in non-defense spending? What are we going to do on the revenue side to pay for this? And therefore.
And the market, I mean, like we've been trying to tie this back to what do we do in the marketplace. I mean, the market's been very efficient in giving defense stocks huge multiples. Intermittently there'll be some timing problems. But the bigger picture, I guess your point is, the bigger picture is that there'll be plenty of reasons to spend, plenty of recapitalization to occur. So for longer term investors, defense should have big multiples.
Yes, and right, you're paying for it now. And so we're seeing we're flattening out the outlays, which is really the measure. Most of the budgets we're talking about are budget authority, and the money then is granted by Congress and then has to be put on contract and spent. So what you need to track are outlays. Outlays are consistently going up. We're coming off the flat part of we bottomed out on the outlays, if you will, over the past years. Now they're starting to come up, and are coming up particularly in the procurement and investment sectors. And I guess the third point I'd make here, the third main theme I'd go at is this money, all of this increased defense spending is going to fewer and fewer programs, so it's being concentrated. So the in a $110 billion, $120 billion procurement budget, 15 to 20 billion of that is going to go to the Joint Strike Fighter program, which is
big nut.
So it's being concentrated into fewer programs, which is driving behaviors. It causes the government to seek ways to squeeze the margins of those few programs, and creates somewhat of an ins and outs. If you're a contractor who's not on the inside, some of these big contracts, you're out looking for other sources of revenue,
Yep.
foreign military sales, et cetera.
And if you're on one of the big programs and you have any sniffle of a timing problem, I mean, we saw this with Lockheed. I mean,
Yes.
it's something that we like longer term, but there was a shorter term timing
right.
problem, correct?
That's right. And I think the market tends to overreact to every little news bite. Because they're so large, they attract their own interest. And really, many of these news blips are just blips and have absolutely no impact on the bottom line. I think we'll see that in the quarterly earnings reports coming out.
What do you think, I guess my last question would be, what do you think Trump does? And again, maybe we're painting the probability map here, too accurately or maybe not, but what do you think Trump does when and if he loses from a media perspective? Do you think that he can be antagonistic to this scenario or perpetuate the scenario of more government spending on the defense side?
Well, many of his pronouncements out there in the campaign, and over the past 8-9 months, however long he's been at it, and if he goes off and establishes a new network and tries to splinter the Republican Party, you can bet that he's going to go after strong defense and taking care of veterans, et cetera, putting more pressure on the defense spending side within the party, and further pushing down deficit hawks and fiscal hawks. So the tension between the Republican Party has been for proponents for a strong defense and then against those for reduce the overall deficit. My sense is that Trump doesn't pay too much attention to the deficit, and so that's where he's going to be pushing.
Well, if he's as smart as he has been from a media asset, the guy's a huge media asset, and he calls himself huge. But at the end of the day, if he goes after places that are populist, going after the Tea Party on defense spending is probably a good place to start.
Yes, absolutely, and he'll be pushing down on those, pushing back on the fiscal hawks even more than they are. And of course, the Democrats are over there clamoring for non-defense spending, and they're willing to give defense spending as the price to get to the increased non-defense spending. And overall, the debt goes up.
Yeah, I see very little probability with Hillary winning that the debt is going down.
That's correct.
So maybe that's right. A good spot to end, because defense spending is a good spot to be too in terms of investment. That's a place that we still like. But again, be patient and take advantage of these pullbacks in some of the bigger defense spending plays. And again, you're probably going to get that with market volatility. Thanks. Now I'm with Paul Glencher, who heads up our telecom and media policy research team. Paul, if you look at what's going on here in terms of the big themes into and out of the election, what would you start with?
I'd say the biggest one just takes off from where we are now into the Obama administration, which is basically how they're commoditizing the folks who've spent billions creating these networks that we all rely on.
Yeah.
The telecom companies, the cable companies, the wireless companies. Everyone's excited about being able to get everything they want, in the cloud, over the internet. But it costs a lot of money to build those networks. And what you've seen is a policy where they're increasingly just becoming these commoditized bit distributors, and they're being squeezed out of other ways they could make money off these networks. And the question becomes, what's the investment case for these guys if the government continues to take away their upside opportunity to monetize their networks and transfer most of the power, most of the value creation over the internet to the companies on the edge, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Netflixes of the world. And the question is, does that trend continue? Or after this election coming up, does that trend begin to slow down? And do you see a shift back toward the network providers in terms of the power and value within the ecosystem?
Is there a difference on that between Republican Senate or not, Republican House or not? Like, how do you think about the parties versus the ultimate presidential victor?
Increasingly, it's Republicans for the network guys, Democrats for the edge guys.
Okay.
Increasingly, and if you look at the money flow in terms of people contributing to campaigns, you're finding that sort of the Silicon Valley edge provider, the Facebook, Google types, are going with the Democrats, and the Republicans are the ones that have basically become the support group for the network guys. It's never 100% one way or the other, obviously. You have a guy like Peter Thiel, who's been, for the Republicans. He's been for Trump. But in general, I think you're seeing more and more that sides are breaking down that way. You've got the Democrats getting the edge guys, you've got the Republicans getting the network guys.
Now, how about on the Supreme Court side? You're one of the few who sits in these proceedings, and you're fully engaged.
Oh, sure.
What do you think could happen there if you have a Senate House? Is there a combo that scares you, or a combo that excites you?
Well, the Senate, of course, makes the call on confirming Supreme Court appointments. The assumption, I think, and the fair assumption would be, despite what Senator McConnell and others have said, if Hillary Clinton wins the election in November, I think they'll move pretty quickly to confirm Merrick Garland. He's a moderate Democrat. The thinking is that if she could appoint the next Supreme Court justice, it might be an appointment to the left of Merrick Garland. So it would be in the Republicans' best interest to probably confirm Judge Garland. Going forward from there, you could have more liberal appointees to all the federal courts. And that actually raises a really big macro issue, I think. We'll see how it all turns out. But you've had now 8 years of Obama appointees to the federal courts. Presumably, we don't know for sure, Hillary Clinton would probably be more moderate than Barack Obama, but still you'd have the Democrats driving the appointments to the court. That's 4 more years of Republican retirements replaced with young Democratic judges. And the question becomes, how does that change the whole system of government?
Well, net neutrality is one of your top themes.
Yeah,
so
it is.
So what do you think how do you think that plays out for investors?
Well, right now I think investors figure that this sort of utility regulatory model, which is very constraining for the Charters and the Comcasts and the Verizons and AT&Ts of the world, that model will persist because the appellate court has upheld it, and a lot of the thinking out there, I think the conventional wisdom is that the Supreme Court is not likely to take that case, or if they do, reverse what the lower court did, which would leave this rather burdensome model in place for those guys, which is great for the Netflixes of the world. That could change, and the Supreme Court early next year, I think, will get a shot at this one. They may take it, they may not, but I think there's a reasonable shot they'll take it. And there's a case that I don't think anyone is focused on that could relate to this net neutrality appeal. And it has to do with getting rid of what we were just talking about, this idea that federal courts should sort of defer to the expert agencies most of the time, whenever they make some sort of rule or order. There are times where the courts say, we don't do that. And if that becomes an issue in the Supreme Court case, then I think investors have to reset all their expectations about how these telecom and cable providers are going to be regulated.
I mean, Netflix in particular, people don't talk about that in terms of a full, there's no multiple compression that's in that stock associated with any kind of an event risk there. I can't.
Right. Well, now they're unique in the sense, Keith, that they're making some progress. There's increasingly, like Comcast is putting Netflix on their box. And things like that. But you have to think of some of these other guys, Dish Sling, Sony View, Hulu's out there, CBS All Access, HBO. More and more companies are putting their content online. And so you get into an issue about whether access is truly going to be equal for subscribers. So I think it's important, and we haven't resolved yet everything through the court process, but it could come to a head sometime around the first quarter of next year. We'll find out if the Supremes will take an interest.
And how about 5G network buildup?
That's a big deal because everything is transforming. There'll be chips in your refrigerator that tell you when you're out of milk. I don't want that chip in my refrigerator, but there's other people who will.
Well, these chips now that Amazon puts some buttons on things where you just reorder it. As soon as you're done drinking this, you hit the button, it's coming. Is that what you mean?
That's right. It's that, but it's a variety of things. We have smart meters. We have water usage in the home. You have all sorts of things where we could, home security, all of these things, and health monitoring is a big one, obviously. Do you need to administer more medication, things like that. So all that stuff is coming, and that's running over these networks. And the thinking is we'll get to this next generation of wireless network, which is in different parts, some of it of the spectrum that we don't use today. And it'll be real time, there'll be no latency. We're talking about enabling things like remote surgery, right? Someone on the other side of the country can guide someone who's actually doing the surgery at another medical center. These kind of things I think are coming. It raises a lot of cybersecurity questions, but to build these kind of networks, it'll take a lot of money, and what you're seeing is the regulators trying to find ways to create incentives to get those networks built more quickly. So for example, there's local zoning laws that say, we don't want you to put this tower here, or we don't want you to use that billboard sign or that street light, which a lot of equipment will be put on in these next networks. And it's slowing things down. Are they going to, the FCC, for example, come in and say, the cities, you've got to just let them build this, get out of the way. Well, it's going to make a lot of mayors upset, but nonetheless, they're moving in that direction. And you're seeing, for example, reducing prices that AT&T, for example, or CenturyLink will charge for wireless carriers to flow the traffic from the wireless cell tower to other parts of the network. That's critical to driving the economics of deployment for this stuff. So what you're seeing is efforts by the government to more quickly get this stuff being built.
In particular, when you just think of what we started the conversation with, which is how do we keep regulating and consolidating all these effectively public non-government entities that are building out this 5G network? I mean, it's a real tough one. I mean, why would you put so much risk and invested capital
That's right.
into that?
If they're curbing your ability to get upside out of it, and they are. And I'll give you a great example. I don't know what wireless carrier you use, but T-Mobile has this binge-on service, and my kids love it. Because they can watch things like Netflix, Major League Baseball, and they don't. That data usage doesn't count against the monthly.
Oh, really?
allotment.
So they call it binge?
It's called. You can binge watch those. What the trade-off is that T-Mobile downgrades the quality, the resolution of the video. But for most people, they don't even notice the difference. It's a small little screen you're looking on. You'd notice it on a big TV screen, but the little screen on your phone, maybe not. So they use it all up, and they're not worried about getting an overcharge, a data surcharge. Well, the thing is, that's great for consumers. It's great for consumers, but you have the net neutrality folks to say, well, that's wrong. That's wrong. You shouldn't allow certain content to be, slowed down versus other content. The carrier shouldn't do that. But see, it's creating a consumer benefit.
Right.
And I think that's what we're looking at. How can you experiment with different business models to drive greater investment and innovation by the network providers?
Well, this is also why, and we've talked about it on some morning research calls, there's a difference between T-Mobile and AT&T.
Right.
There's difference in innovation, products, aggressiveness in T-Mobile's case, but you've said more than a few times, like, look, these little getting bigger guys, and they're really not small to begin with, but they're going to keep getting the benefit of the doubt, are they not?
That's right.
At the expense of the AT&T.
There's no question.
That's an interesting one, the two paired off against each other, for example.
They are. The regulators have made it very clear in this administration that, if you're AT&T and Verizon, for the most part, you're the bad guys.
Yep.
If you're Sprint and T-Mobile, you're the good guys. And so I think they've made it very clear that they're tilting the regulatory process in favor of the smaller guys. The one place, of course, they've put the stop sign up on those guys is the discussions that they had about merging T-Mobile and Sprint, which is controlled by SoftBank. They kind of indicated that's a no-go. What is interesting...
All good unless you combine with the Japanese.
That's right, that's right. What is interesting is going to be in the next administration. Are they going to be a little looser when it comes to consolidation? Are they going to be quite as reflexively against deals the way, I think this administration has been? The philosophy, I think, has been quite different.
So if you have a Republican House and Senate, you're saying any flip of the Senate would be on the margin of change in that regard?
It could. I mean, remember, the mergers are reviewed by the Justice Department. The Hill really has no say on those things, other than they can ratchet up or down political pressure for or against a deal. But it's up to the Justice Department, and when it's a telecom type deal, the FCC, both of them, to look at them and decide whether they want to block these kind of deals or condition them. Obviously, they stopped Comcast Time Warner Cable. They discouraged very strongly the T-Mobile Sprint deal. But could we get to the point where the next administration, clearly if it's a Republican administration, it's going to be easier. It's not a slam dunk, none of them are, but I think they would be not reflexively opposed to them. And even in a Clinton administration, will there be a little bit more understanding of the drivers that these companies feel, are critical to deciding whether a merger makes sense. You know, Comcast and Charter just announced they're entering the wireless business. So you think, well, doesn't that make a difference? It could. Conventional wisdom says it doesn't because they don't own their networks right now. It's still, you know, T-Mobile, Sprint, Verizon, AT&T. So I think we could see between, you know, new entrants into the market, changes in administration, a whole new line of thinking beginning to emerge on what consolidation is or is not allowable.
That's great. Well, it's something to look forward to, certainly,
Sure.
as we go forward. Or, you know, some people think the election is going to take us backwards. You know, I have no opinion on that. But
Sure.
thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Appreciate it. Now I'm with Emily Evans, who heads up our healthcare policy research team. She's in Nashville, so she's got all the fun stuff going on there. You're just back from your conference, which went very, very well. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. It was terrific.
So what are the big healthcare themes, you know, associated with this election?
Number one is affordability of health insurance. That is a big one.
Okay. What does that mean?
Well,
Well, I think I know what it means, but go ahead.
premiums have made the news. Increased premiums on the Affordable Care Act exchanges are a big deal. Double digit, triple digit, if that's possible. Increases in premiums, which are offset to some degree by the cost sharing that the federal government does. But the really bad news is that off exchange, individual purchases of insurance have seen increased premiums, no cost sharing or no help from the federal government, and much higher deductibles.
Ooh, so that wasn't really according to plan.
That is not according to plan.
So
no.
is the plan is that the plan's going to change, or are we going to keep rolling with this?
Well, that's the big question. And if I think that I think it's a very open question, right? Because the repeal of the Affordable Care Act is still the cause célèbre of the Republican Party.
Yep.
They're modifying that a little bit, but that is still what sells at home, and it sells even better at home when your deductibles and your premiums are going up than it did when we didn't know actually what was going to happen. So the idea that there's going to be some breakthrough to fix that is probably not likely, regardless of who becomes the president of the United States.
And if we're rolling with just the high probability pitch that it's not Trump, we're not going to repeal it. It's not going to be some, you know, thundering, crashing repeal of Obamacare or anything like that. It'll be an adjustment.
If even that happens,
Right.
It could just be a slow roll to 2018 without any real change and a lot of really angry healthcare consumers.
Yeah, and healthcare investors. Now that's the other part of ACA, which we affectionately call the ACA taper.
That's right.
Because
yeah.
if they don't repeal it, they still have to lap it. So can you kind of walk through what that means on a year-over-year basis and why a lot of people, I think, Emily, have been surprised with their healthcare holdings this year. It's now worse than financials, which is pretty bad.
Right.
And you have a lot of lapping of the tough comparisons.
Yeah, because you had this just surge into the system of people with a lot of pent-up demand. Because remember, we knew the Affordable Care Act passed in 2010, but you didn't have access to that health insurance until 2014.
Right.
So what did you do between 2010 and 2014? You just put stuff off so everybody rushes into the system, 2014, 2015. Now that has receded, and everybody's facing the sort of the hangover, which is higher deductibles, higher premiums, you know, and some people are thinking, thank goodness I got that hip replaced, you know, when I did, because there's no way I can do it now. And yeah, I think it's going to be just the taper is real, and it is going to probably be exacerbated by those higher cost sharing.
See, now
factors.
when I think that through, and I've talked a lot with macro investors about this, they can get comfortable with lapping these comparisons,
Right.
the underperformance of the stocks. The thing they can't get comfortable with is, I think, one of your other themes, which is drug pricing.
Right.
The open the envelope nature to this. Like, how do you think that plays through if Hillary's the
So
president?
the second big issue in the election is drug pricing. And you'll note that Bernie Sanders went to California this week to campaign for Proposition 61. Proposition 61 is a state-based effort to keep drug pricing in California's Medicaid program to that equal to the Veterans Administration's purchasing price. That is that I didn't think that was going to pass earlier in the year, but because of the bad behavior of Valiant, the EpiPen thing, it's more front and center, it's more an issue, and people are increasingly going, okay, we need to do something about this. Those higher deductibles we mentioned earlier, well, the more drugs cost, the more regular people pay for them, the more they care about a $600 EpiPen. And that's coming into to play as well. Hospitals and drug companies have enjoyed a fairly cozy relationship, but now that they're having to write off more and more bad debt because they're not getting paid because of higher deductibles and higher cost sharing, they're less interested in higher drug prices.
A lot of the discussions we've had today with different policy heads has to do with that very basic point, is that no matter what you think could happen, there will be gridlock and it will happen probably at a future date relative to your invested expectation.
Right, and Hillary Clinton is not, if you look at her drug plan, it isn't particularly acrimonious when it comes to drugs.
Right.
You know, she's looking for more competition. You know, she's looking for a smoother path for generic approvals. She's looking for more, a better funding of the FDA to get things through a little bit faster, so people can't take advantage of purchasing patents. You know, they don't even manufacture drugs, right? They don't even research. They just buy a patent and they mark the price up. She wants to put an end to that, which I think is probably realistic. But if you look at her plan, it is not scary socialization of the drug business.
Okay, I mean, I think that's important for people to understand.
Yeah.
How about public option and single payer as a theme?
So the public option and single payer tend to get conflated in the mind of the public. They're two very different things. Public option is a health insurer that would ride along with the private market.
Okay.
And a good analogy is if you're familiar with the flood insurance programs in Florida and Louisiana. There's lots of private flood insurance in Florida and Louisiana, but there are places that can't get flood insurance in Florida and Louisiana, like you know, Key West. They use a public option.
How would you calibrate and predict that? Like, how do you, from a research perspective, get yourself up that probability curve?
Single payer, notwithstanding the Colorado ballot measure, I would put near 0%.
Zero.
Yeah.
That's a good percentage. Okay.
Yeah. Public option is something that will probably be proposed on a state-by-state basis. It will be proposed through something called a 1332 waiver. In healthcare policy research, we use lots of code section citations, and this was one of them. 1332 waiver, and that's Colorado's basis for the ballot. There's also Vermont, might do that, and that's how it would come about. And the way Clinton has proposed, and the way she's talked about it, is that it would be an option for people who had no other options.
Okay.
So in those counties where you don't have an ACA fee enrollment, an ACA insurer, you would have the public option.
Let's say, you talk about this holy grail for Democrats. What does the left look like relative to the holy grail? Like if Bernie is pulling Hillary that way.
So and that is a very real dynamic, because they call it the Warren-Sanders wing of the Democratic Party. And that wing of the party has actually kept a lot of good things from getting done in this last session, and will probably continue to do it. That wing of the Democratic Party isn't really that much different than what we call the Freedom Caucus in the House Republicans. They're very unwilling. Yeah, they're very committed to their issues. And in that case, they're very committed to single payer. They would like the federal government to just be Medicare for all.
It's like where I'm from.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which is very left.
It's very left.
If Bernie would run as a Republican candidate.
They want drug pricing to be controlled, almost like a utility. They want the single payer would eliminate the need for affordability, because the federal government would simply insure everybody. It would work just like Medicare.
So that's the holy grail.
That's the holy grail.
Wow. Now, if you overlay that, I guess my last question would be the media component to this, the Trumpification post. And again, admittedly, we're assuming he loses, because we like to go with the high probability. We don't want to waste people's time. I mean,
Right,
if he wins, great, we'll do another one. I mean, but at the end of the day, the Trumpification with this Trump TV idea, how do you think he goes? I mean, he would go after, like you said, repealing ACA was pretty popular. I mean, would he go after Fox and Republicans on that, or what would he do? Like,
You know, my impression of Trump's healthcare policy is he's just not that interested in it.
he doesn't care.
No, and he may care, but he's not interested. And so a lot of what he has talked about has really been pulled from the House Republicans' platform, which is known as A Better Way, which is a fully developed, wonky, things I read on Friday night policy statement.
The stuff Ken Bone is reading.
Exactly. So that's the. So he's been pulling stuff out of that. I assume for the purposes of keeping whatever support he has from the likes of Paul Ryan intact, and because he doesn't care. You know, he's not that interested in the topic. He's more interested in geopolitical issues. He's more interested in immigration and national defense and things like that.
So ultimately for you, I mean, if we play it right up the middle on the playbook and say it's Hillary, it's either left of Hillary or far left to what you call the Holy Grail, effectively.
I would say that's probably that's probably a likely course.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's going to be a real struggle to get anything meaningful done in 17 and 18.
Is there anything right off the top that they'd go for that would be easy to get done? Because she has to get something done.
Yeah, so I think I don't think it's going to be healthcare. I think it'll be infrastructure. Would be more like. I don't think it's going to be healthcare at all. The health, she can accomplish a lot healthcare wise, administratively, without touching Congress. Through demonstrations and waivers and a few other things like that. So I think that I don't see any real big radical changes. And with the Republicans looking at the electoral map changing in 18, they're sitting there thinking, well, we don't have to do anything here. We don't want a bipartisan compromise. You know, they'll basically flip the playbook that Senator Reid has used for the last 2 years, which is don't cooperate, because in a close race, they're just going to go home and talk about how they work well with Democrats in those sort of middle of the road jurisdictions.
That's interesting. Because I mean, sometimes a lot of the time in markets, it's a time to do absolutely nothing. And that's really the point. Like with healthcare, that's what investors are effectively deciding to do for now. If they can't get in front of a V-bottom on healthcare, on drug pricing, for example, the biotech stocks, and they just have to look at this cycle, which is slowing against a massive set of comparisons with ACA, you know, you end up in a place that for healthcare investors is very difficult.
Well, there are places for healthcare investors that they should think about, though.
Okay,
even
good.
Even in that context.
Good. I need some long ideas.
Okay,
because
so
Tom Tobin keeps giving me short ideas. You know, Tom Tobin. For those of you that don't know, Tom Tobin runs the long-short, you know, stock picking component. But Emily's his chief advisor. Emily's the policy gal, but I think
I hope you include that.
I think you should be Tom's new boss. So, especially if you give me a long idea, because the guy won't give me any long ideas. All he gives me is short ideas.
All right, behavioral health. Behavioral health, substance abuse. This is
substance abuse. Now that's a theme that I could see developing.
Okay, so
I mean,
if you
what's
look,
the ticker on behavioral health?
it's actually not ACHC, Arcadia.
Oh, okay.
And then AAC are the two behavioral health.
So you mean as a theme?
And UHS, behavioral health is the theme. That is an area where Republicans and Democrats agree.
Really?
Yes.
Because they all have mental issues at this point.
Well,
is it just emotional or mental that you're talking?
It's behavioral.
Behavioral.
That's why we call it behavioral health. Boy, this is all going to be on the floor, isn't it? So the behavioral health piece is, and that drug abuse comes under that, opioid abuse, right? Opioid abuse is a scourge of rural areas in America. I mean, it is epidemic, it is horrible, and it is affecting a lot of red states. And it is, politics is local, politics is personal, and when your constituents start dying of overdoses, it gets your attention. The other thing I would say, long ideas, is that healthcare is, with nothing going on in 17 and 18, no major legislative changes, all right? What we're looking at is a greater and greater influence of high deductible plans and high deductible activity, high deductible plans, and all that comes with it. So what does that mean? That means the lowest cost provider. you're going to want to use the lowest cost provider. And so telemedicine, TDOC, for example, TDOC, that's a pretty low cost provider, phone call. Care in the home health, another very low cost provider. Any kind of outpatient, outpatient care. So those are two, relative to the rest of the system, that will probably be the beneficiary of deflationary trends brought on by
I love that.
high deductible.
That's great. I mean, I don't like behavioral health problems, but I like that. I mean, to me, it's like infrastructure. Everybody wants it at this point, so it's hard to ignore it. Even if you're, again, I'm not a big raging Keynesian big government spending guy, but I'll acknowledge that infrastructure and defense spending are realities, bipartisan realities, and this sounds like one too.
Right, and behavioral health is a system that has never had, it's never really been treated as a health system like patient acute care hospitals, for example. You've been funded through grants from states or federal governments. It has been operated largely by nonprofit, local community entities, and now it's going to have to scale. It's scaling, and that's what AAC and ACHC and UHS are doing.
Well, thank you very much. She's Emily Evans, and she has long ideas in the face of a very bearish macro healthcare outlook. Thanks a lot. Now I'm with Joe McMoneagle, who is our energy sector policy expert, who goes back and forth with me all the time on all the fun stuff. Iran, freeze, unfreeze.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oil prices.
I'm going to get into that. Actually, we'll do that first, and then we'll get into some of your bigger post-election themes.
Yeah.
But first, Iran, oil markets, where do you think we are and where that could kind of go through the election?
Yeah. So it actually feeds into the topic today because the Iran nuclear deal is kind of a deciding, impact from the election. If Trump wins, he said he'll rip up the agreement and renegotiate it because he's the master negotiator. Clinton will probably continue it. And so for oil markets, that's pretty significant because as you point out, Iran has kind of added about 1 million barrels a day, 900,000, depending on what source you're talking to. And that's significant because the U.S. production has declined about 1 million barrels a day since its high in April of 2014. So all that Iran production this year has just replaced the declines in U.S. production. If the deal were to go away and U.S. sanctions were to be reimposed again, Iran would have a tough time exporting that oil again. So it would have a significant impact on prices. Now, the Obama administration would tell you that there's no way the U.S. can walk away from this. The Europeans won't go along with us. That's probably the case. But U.S. sanctions, I think, would worry a lot of European companies, banks that have to do business here. So my guess, even though the European countries wouldn't go along, I think it would still have a major impact on the deal. Now, having said all that, I actually think this is one of these issues that if Trump is elected president and he wants to, go down this road, I think once he gets the intelligence briefings and, the more policy briefings, I think he will have a second thought. I think he's going to have to give it more time, mainly because Iran's had sanctions lifted for about a year now. They've gotten all this revenue. They've gotten all the benefits of the deal. If we were to walk away now, it would just give them an excuse to pursue the nuclear program again. So I think he's kind of stuck on this one. I don't agree with a lot of the Obama, prognostications about, whoever's president, they're stuck with these policies like on the Clean Power Plan, et cetera. But on this, I do think it's one of these issues, like for Obama in Iraq, how he wanted to pull troops immediately, and he had second thoughts about that. He wanted to close Guantanamo, and then once he was elected, had second thoughts. So I think the similar thing is true with Trump, but as we've seen over and over again, he's a wild card.
Oh yeah, so that's, and it would be a wild card anyway, just to assume that scenario, and I think it's important that you outline what the difference is, because of course, if we just go with the high probability pitch and it's Hillary, we're just going to have to go with what that is it just going to be more of the same, I guess, as it would be Obama 2.0 and energy
I think it will
policy?
be. I mean, interestingly enough, the Saudis' friends that I talked to actually think she will be tougher on Iran than the Obama administration.
Really?
Because really what Obama has done is kind of a detente with Iran and has kind of tried to reshuffle the decks of the geopolitical status in the Middle East. And I think they think she will be much tougher if they misbehave. There'll be consequences, whereas Obama, I think, has tried to let them slide a little bit so he can preserve the deal. So, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to all depend on, does Iran behave? Do they uphold what they have to uphold under the agreement?
I mean, she's hard-nosed and she likes to tell you that she's going to get things done. So I don't doubt that. Any change in the team, on the energy policy team? With that?
Well, this is very interesting. We actually think, and I've talked to some folks in the Clinton campaign, that Secretary Moniz is probably one of the only cabinet members in the Obama team that could be asked to stay.
Really?
Yes, and I think there's several reasons. Number one, I think he's the star of the cabinet. I mean, setting aside John Kerry and Secretary Liu, I guess, to some extent. I mean, the press likes him. He's very good in Capitol Hill. He's viewed as a straight shooter. And because of the Iran deal and the ongoing, he's a nuclear physicist, he had to be there for a lot of those technical discussions. So I think for the ongoing monitoring of the deal, I think that in and of itself is probably a good enough thing. I'm told he loves the job and would love to continue, but his wife is probably not completely on board with that scenario. So there's a bunch of others that I think could also be in play, but I think it's very likely I think he would stay, Commissioner.
So you basically get a fortified Democrat energy team, and also on the heels of what you probably didn't, you've said this, but whether it's one of your big themes, clean power or carbon regulation, like he didn't really need Congress to get a lot of things done, but they do have like an all-star energy team on the Dem side anyway.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, unlike I think other issue areas, the Obama administration has kind of showed that the executive branch and the regulatory apparatus can really just go alone. And Congress can stop them, but they just haven't had the, in the Senate especially, haven't had the, enough seats to really overrule EPA. So the courts have kind of been the deciding factor. And so the other two areas that I'm focusing on, for the change in the White House is really the Clean Power Plan and then energy infrastructure. And then so on the Clean Power Plan, this is a situation where whoever gets to pick the next Supreme Court justice really decides
Is that it?
the
Really?
fate. Yes, yes, really, because Congress hasn't been able to stop it, so the industry has had to go to the courts to try to get the thing overturned. And the Supreme Court, when Scalia was still on the court, I think really surprised everybody by staying the implementation of the rule. I don't think anyone really thought that would happen. And so the EPA has not been able to continue implementing the rule or laying out standards for states to implement carbon regulation in the power sector. And essentially, I joke if Scalia had taken better care of his health, the rule would probably have been doomed because I think it was a signal that the court was looking to strike it down.
Okay, and energy infrastructure, what's your
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest unwritten stories so far of the campaign because as you're seeing now and we saw with the Keystone Pipeline, and we're seeing now with this Dakota pipeline, the Energy Transfer Partners is trying to pursue, and the Obama administration is, even though the Army Corps of Engineers has approved it like 4 or 5 times, they're trying to say, we need to review the approvals, and a court has said it can go forward, but the environmentalists look at it as the next Keystone, and they've had a lot of trouble in states impacting upstream development because it creates a lot of jobs in that local area, and so they've kind of punted on that type of activity and are focusing on the infrastructure to take it from point A to point B. And so that's the battleground, really.
Despite a lot of efforts. I mean, movies upon movies, everything. I mean, they couldn't stop it.
Exactly.
Because jobs growth reigns supreme.
Yes, exactly. And so what you're seeing, so what I think you're going to see here, I mean, most people a lot of clients that I meet with on Wall Street, they think Clinton is going to sort of govern from the middle, like Bill, be a moderate. I think because of the Sanders primary challenge, she's going to be constantly looking over her left shoulder
great point.
and looking for a primary challenge. So that means she's going to be governing from the left. I mean, a year ago, if you would have asked me Clinton on energy, I would have said she'd probably be less bad than Obama. But I think she could be much worse than Obama.
Much worse?
Yes, I think she could really pursue a more aggressive stance on energy infrastructure. And so that's something I'm really watching closely. I think she's going to get much more aggressive on methane rules for pipelines, which is an area that EPA does have jurisdiction over. I think you're going to constantly be seeing, federal intervention, pressure on hydraulic fracturing. Even though the feds have no jurisdiction right now, I think she's going to be looking for a way to get into that. And so I think there's a lot of, and Obama has showed us, I think, that if you have a mind to do it and you want to use EPA, you can definitely do it.
I mean, you can do a lot of different things. I mean, it's at the end of the day, you kind of look at this tugging to the left is now the thing that most, again, of your colleagues were saying today, that whether it's the Senate Banking Committee or Elizabeth Warren or Bernie over here, Bernie over there, depends on where the burn is spending some time. I mean, is he a factor in the energy policy debate at all?
Well, he is in that during the primary. He basically said he's against fracking, period.
Period.
Whereas Clinton's position was, if the local community and the state is opposed, then I'm opposed and the federal government should be opposed. I mean, that was her position.
But that's not his bailiwick, right? He's not.
It's not really, but the environmental groups are such a key constituency of the Democratic Party. If you're worried about a primary challenge from Elizabeth Warren or Sanders or who knows else, you're going to put a lot of focus on it.
And how about that versus the other point that's been made is that the Tea Party becomes a bigger part of a smaller whole. Where does that fit in this policy debate?
Well, I think Trump has been very pro energy. I mean, he's basically embraced the industry.
So basically, we get through this election, it's still going to be in oil markets headline speak. It's going to be volatile. I mean, I don't think that Trump or Hillary is going to eliminate the oil market volatility.
Definitely not. No, I mean, November 30th is the next OPEC meeting, which we'll be watching very closely.
Where's that?
It's in Vienna again. Okay. I'm going. And there'll be a lot of expectations. They've built tremendous expectations that they're going to come to a deal. And so if they don't, or if it's the market sees through whatever smoke and mirrors they tried to put in place, I think we could see a really big decline in pricing.
So November the 30th, that is, again, people that are watching this, they always try to find a tangible point on the calendar of macro catalysts. So that's like, if you're looking at oil puts, for example, I mean, that would be a reasonable date. I don't know what other date matters. Is there any other date that matters?
There's a couple of meetings in between between now and the November 30th of sort of higher ranking but not minister level people that are going to be trying to work on this deal. Meetings in Russia, I'm sure.
But all in the hope to uphold what they've currently accomplished, which is not 40 but 50 WTI.
Right. And to try to come to a deal, they announced a deal to try to get a deal at this November 30th meeting, but they basically punted all the hard work, and it's just unclear whether they're going to be able to come to anything significant.
Well, it's a good thing we have to have a good analyst to follow it all. I mean, if it all got down to one super simple thing, then nobody would be of value here. So thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Good to be here.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. I learned a lot. That's basically what I do all day long here. I pester these analysts. I ask them questions. They give me the answers that they do research on throughout the day. Real analysts that do real work. We don't, again, find a way to come up with some kind of a newsy headline. What we're trying to do is contextualize this election, which is clearly a critical election. They always are, and put it in the broader space of time. What happens after this election? What are the catalysts? What are the probable events? What are improbable events? How do we put those bets on long and short? So again, that's how we roll, and we're really happy that you joined us. Thanks a lot.